Have you ever noticed that at all the comics, movies, TV series that we watch, a little imposed on us the image of superheroes? For example, Batman is a rich dude who drives around Gotham in a Batmobile, catches criminals, puts a brand on them and sends the villains to prison, where they will meet a terrible fate. Or Captain America, a lab rat who was pumped up by an experiment, then was frozen for many years. I'm already silent about the Hulk, the Green Beast, Flash, or Wolverine. What if we look at our world with more real eyes? I will share with you a secret. My mother is a superhero. Every day she did something unreal, which is what we admired. The thing is, the three of us have been living together for a very long time, and we don't have a father. Him and my mom are divorced, so she's raising us alone. In truth, we didn't really need a father, because Supermom managed to replace him. She managed to work hard, but at the same time, spend every free minute with us. My little brother and I remembered her as a supermom because she always came to our aid like a real superhero. She had a lot of different abilities, such as heat resistance. I remember from my childhood, as we sat three, me, my mother, my brother, and drank tea. All of a sudden, my little brother gets off the chair and starts freaking out. He tried to approach me and hit the tablecloth, and everything on the table, including the hot kettle, fell in his direction. Just in a second, my mother caught the teapot with her bare hands and put it back on the table. Not a single drop spilled. Imagine! But the most amazing thing is that she did not even pay attention to the burn. The first thing she noticed was us. She asked if we were all right, no one was hurt, and then looked at her reddened hand. She also had the gift of speed, like Flash. The three of us were walking down the street. My mother had heavy bags in her hands, and my brother and I took it easy. Samuel ran out into the road, saw $1 lying there, and wanted to pick it up. But I didn't see a car coming around the corner at high speed. I was dumbfounded from fright, mentally realizing that it was impossible to reach him. We would not have time. At that moment, our mother flew and pulled him by the sleeve to her, and they both fell to the sidewalk. I ran up to them all scared, and my mother looked so collected. I turned around and saw our groceries lying on the road. Samuel felt guilty and didn't say anything other than, "Sorry, Mom, I won't do it again." Our mom was as strong as Superman. I remember when I was younger, I used to run and play on the roof of the house. I thought it was the best place to see the sunset, but I didn't think that by carelessness, the sunset could put an end to my life. Once, when my mother was at work, I decided to fly a kite. It caught on the pipe on the roof, and I climbed to untangle the knots. I lost my balance and was already falling down with a scream. Suddenly, I felt a soft landing. It turns out that my mother left work early because she suddenly felt ill. She saw me on the roof and wanted to yell for me to come down, but she was afraid to scare me off. In the end, when I was falling, she managed to catch me. But her most important gift was to animate people. I remember when I was my brother's age. My father lived with us then. My dad and I were sitting at home alone, and he bought me a pizza and we ate it. And my mom called and said she was going to be late at work. My dad was very nervous at the time. He was jealous. I don't think he believed she was working. It was raining really hard that night. He took me by the hand, somehow dressed me warmly, put me in the car, and we went to her work. Dad looked very angry. He answered my questions dryly, or yelled, and I was so hungry that I took a half-eaten slice of pizza with me and took small bites all the way. We arrived at the place. My dad pulled me out of the car, approached a woman, and called my mother's name. She told us to sit down and wait for a bit. Then I saw her in the corridor. My mother came out with a smile on her face and was very surprised. She came up to us and asked what we were doing here, but Dad just blurted out, "To check if you're lying to us." My mother smiled, patted his face, and said, "Howard, please, not here. You can see I'm working. Drive home." Then she leaned in, kissed me, and took a bite of pizza. Suddenly there was a noise. People ran into the corridor. They were carrying someone on gurneys. There were adults and children. All of them were bleeding, but unconscious, like a sleeping princess, lay the woman, the mother. It was a family that got into a terrible accident that night because of the rain. They were all crying, and the man was in shock. Dad and I leaned against the wall and watched. Mom screamed that the intensive care unit was busy, ran to the woman, cut her clothes, and began to examine something inside her. Then she said in a commanding tone to bring her some necessary things, and I didn't quite understand what they were. That woman was unconscious, and there was a lot of blood. My mother did something to her. She stood there for a long time, working with her gloves on, then picked up the thing with the wires, rubbed them together, and touched the unconscious lady. She was shouting, 1, 2, 3, discharge! This happened several times. The woman with her eyes closed was climbing up from the stretcher and falling down again. Then she opened her eyes and started coughing. Her family screamed with joy. Others clapped for my mother, and she stood there, not even paying attention to the applause, peering at the lady, asking questions, and only then, when she got the answers, did she exhale. Yes, my mother is a doctor. She has fought death many times and literally pulled her patients out of its clutches. My mother fought to the last, until she was sure that there was no chance at all. Her work was noble, but it took up almost all the time. When my little brother was born, my dad seemed to be jealous of us and of her work. He couldn't stand it and left, and my mother didn't stop him, just wished him luck. Since then, the three of us have been living together. Sometimes, my brother and I go to the hospital to see my mother, to see how she works. It inspires us to do great things. We play a game of who will save who, although most often we get it on the head for carelessness from my mother. But still, in our eyes, she is a superhero, and even more abruptly than any Superman and Wonder Woman.
My name is Cindy. Not so long ago, I found out my mother's secret, how she makes money. I was just shocked, but I can't tell my father because it will destroy our family even more. To begin with, my father used to have a very good business. He owned a company that produced fabrics that were bought in bulk and shipped to different countries. It was a profitable business, so my mother and I never denied ourselves anything. I loved flying with my father to Milan, where my mother and I could spend hours shopping and then fly home tired and happy. You can't even imagine how great it is to go shopping like this and buy whatever you want, regardless of the price. My father never spared any money for us. I was at a private school, the best in the city, and my mother didn't work. She sat at home every day looking for some new things for the house. By the way, our house was also luxurious, with servants and personal drivers. My mother often received guests. It was her only entertainment. So, as they say, all good things come to an end. Once my mother caught my father in a lie. He was caught cheating with her friend, who came to our house too often. Then my mother went on business to her parents and was supposed to stay there for a few days, but suddenly plans changed, and she returned 2 days earlier. Already from the threshold of the house, she noticed from the expression on the servants' faces that something was happening. And when she went into her and Dad's bedroom, she saw her friend who she had talked to on the phone a couple of hours ago. My mom was beside herself with anger. She smashed her nose, and Dad got hit between the legs with all her might. That woman ran away. My parents didn't talk to each other for a long time, and then my mother, still not reconciled, decided to file for divorce. However, she did not consider one point. In a divorce, the property is usually divided in half, although in my mother's case, she did not get anything, since my father made out all the business and all the real estate and cars for third parties. For the insurance, this meant that if my mother filed for alimony, the maximum would be about $5,000 to $6,000 a month. And with this money, she would not even be able to maintain the house. She would have to give up the servants, move to a more modest house, and, of course, no longer do shopping on a grand scale. Knowing my mother, she would have survived anything but the lack of the above amenities. So it was decided to pretend that nothing had happened. The relationship between my parents gradually faded. My father moved into a different bedroom, and the dinners were also separated. There was silence in the house. I don't know exactly how they felt when they were under the same roof as each other, but it really sucked to watch them get colder and colder. Some of you have probably been through this. At first, I was on the side of my mother, because she was devoted to my father. But then I heard from a friend that it does not happen that one person is guilty. Her parents were divorced a long time ago, so she had some experience in this business. She gave me some good advice, and I decided that I would implement it that day. I arrived home after school and, determined, sent messages to my parents asking them to come to dinner with me today. They certainly did not refuse their only daughter. In the meantime, I prepared something for them. Dad, Mom, I know what happened between you. You don't have to talk about it. It's your choice. Just don't live together for me. I know you both love me. Everything will be fine, but you should get a divorce, I said. To be honest, I could hardly hold back tears when I said this, and the decision was not given just like that. At first, I denied the situation, didn't want to admit it, and then I accepted it. When my mom and dad heard this from me, they were shocked and didn't know what to do. I gave them some time to think. The decision was made. They divorced, and I stayed with my mother. She needed support. Despite the fact that the law left everything to my father, he promised to help my mother and support us as long as necessary. This arrangement suited them, but I never saw them quarrel with each other again, and then quietly hate each other. My mother and I moved to another city, and my father bought an apartment and gave it to me. My mother and I started living there together. Of course, the belt still had to be tightened, but all this is still better than nothing. After about a month, I began to notice my mother's strange behavior. She was always disappearing at night. Maybe she didn't know I noticed it, but she was really out at night and she slept during the day. After another month, she began to make online purchases, and on weekends, we went to boutiques and bought branded clothes like before. Although I loved such trips, I was afraid to imagine what she did and where she got such money. Once, in one of the stores, we were accosted by a man I didn't know. He greeted my mother and talked about money, tips, and obviously took an unhealthy interest in her. Mom whispered something in his ear and he left, and I stood on the sidelines and didn't know what to think. I wanted to ask my father for help. You know, the thought of my mother working her body off at night made me sick. Is she willing to go to such lengths for the sake of things? I am sure that if my father found out about this, he would immediately take me to him, and I was afraid that then my mother would completely lose herself as a woman. That same day, after dinner, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and started to run away. I was so angry that I threw the plate with the rest of the food on the floor and broke it. My mother ran to the crash and asked in surprise what had happened, and I sat and cried with anger. Don't you have enough money that father gives you? Are you so used to expensive clothes that you are ready to jump into bed with men for this? How could you? I'll tell my father everything. My mother's eyes were wide with horror at this moment. What? Do you think I'm a prostitute? She asked me. I said that this is not difficult to guess, judging by the fact that she runs away somewhere every night and meets her customers in the stores. My mother started laughing. She was laughing so hard that I fell into a stupor. What's so funny? She should cry here. Honey, I'm not a prostitute. I work as a waitress in a restaurant. I just didn't tell you so as not to upset you. That man is the owner of our place. More work at night and more generous tips, so I agreed. All that money is everything to you. You like to go shopping, buy what you want, so I went to work. And I'm saving your father's money for your education, she said. At that moment, I was ready to sink through the ground. You can't imagine how ashamed I felt for my thoughts. I asked for her forgiveness and started to cry even more. Then my mother asked me not to tell anyone about it, so as not to lose face among my friends, especially in front of my father. I'm a waitress, but I'm a proud waitress, she told me and gave me a big hug. That's when I realized I hadn't made the wrong choice. My mother is a person who will do anything for me, even overstep herself.